Hey guys, welcome. Dr. Ben here, Functional Medicine Centers. Hope everyone had a great week. Want to just recap some of the things that I've been reading about, been thinking about, and give you guys some stuff to chew on over the weekend. So welcome, and as you're jumping on, go ahead and say hi and tell us where you're watching in from as well. So good to see everybody out there. Interesting. As we think about a pandemic, what's a pandemic? Basically, the definition of a pandemic is that this disease travels around many countries and it travels fast and goes all over the place. So, basically that we can call this a pandemic. The last one that we had was the H1N1 swine flu. And so I was going through and just kind of seeing the difference through some of those things. And H1N1 in the United States in 1 year, in 12 months from April to April, had 60.8 million cases. And I'm like, that's a lot, right? Total deaths that estimated up somewhere is around 18,000 people died from the H1N1. So at this point, we're maybe 6 to 8 million, depending on who's counting for COVID. And with that, hey Sonny, good to see you. Go ahead and tell me where you guys are watching in from. So 60.8 million in the H1N1, 18,000 deaths total in 1 year, and we're looking at 6 to 8 million cases, and they're saying cases. Unfortunately, a lot of these are actually doubled up because they were saying, if someone had a regular PCR test and then an antibody test, they'd count them both as a case. The New York Times saying that the research they were doing, that 90% of the people that are getting classified as a case aren't really a case. They're actually not an infection, and they're not contagious. So total number wise, surprisingly, way less than H1N1. As I was doing some research there, looking into some things, I was also looking at how many deaths have occurred 2018, 2019, and then even 2020, and what we're expecting the full year to be, but even just what we've had according to the CDC up until October 23rd. So when you look at 2018, we had an average of 7,778 deaths per month. Per day on that one, 7,778 deaths per day. In 2019, we had 7,821, so we went up by about 30 there or something along those lines, or 50 per day, which, as the population grows and we're getting more people, more immigrants coming in, things like that. Then we go to 2020, and through October 23rd, we've been averaging 7,809 deaths. So not as low as 2018, but we're actually lower than 2019. So pretty interesting on that one. I was expecting to see, hey, we're up 10,000 a month. If we're at supposedly 220,000 deaths from COVID, then you divide that out over 9 months, and where are we at? But it's actually not doing that, which is great. And it also shows us that probably a lot of the people that are passing away were going to pass away anyways. When we look at some of the states out there that have had some high numbers, I've seen some states that have 80% of the people that have died with COVID were in retirement homes. So this is not it's not affecting the populace like H1N1. H1N1 affected a lot of kids, older people, but it actually affected a lot of kids as well. So we're actually on track to have less death than we did in 2019, which is interesting. And some people say, oh, that's because people weren't driving as much. There's other things playing into that, and then we're like, okay, sure. And yet also, I really think it is that a lot of the people that have passed away with COVID were going to pass from something else, whether they were going to get a flu or have a heart attack or something else that was going on. Anyway, so a few other things that we've been learning is that the remdesivir, the $3,000 for 5 days or however long they run that drug, the research now is showing that it really does not much of anything. If you or a loved one has to go to the hospital with COVID, don't go and try to get on that medication. It just really is not showing to be effective. About the only thing it can show is that it can get somebody out of the hospital a couple days earlier, but there's way better things that we're seeing. One of the big ones that they're showing is that inhaled steroids, especially for the lungs, is going to be very, very helpful. So that's probably the biggest thing that they've found over the last 2-3 months, is that the inhaled steroids, if it gets to a place where somebody's having lung issues, their pulse ox is dropping down, that's going to be a great place to go as well. The other thing that we've seen statistically, people under 40 are at a greater risk of dying from the flu than they are from COVID. So think about that. If you're under 40, and not to say that don't worry about it if you're over 40, we don't care about you, but for everybody that's worried, if you're under 40, you need to be more worried about the flu than you do with COVID. And so that's the great news, is that really people in that demographics, they're not having issues, they're not dying from that. Of course, you're going to hear the story every once in a while on news, mainstream media. They love to say, oh, a healthy 30-year-old died. Well, I can tell you this, I've worked on people for 20 years now, and I can tell you that there's a lot of people that look healthy that are not healthy. So you can't just go off of, hey, that person didn't have full-blown diabetes, so they're healthy. There's a lot of other things going on. So under 40, greater chance of dying from the flu than you do from COVID. Under 20, basically there's zero statistical chance of dying from the flu. So when you look at like canceling football games and all these things, these guys literally have 0% chance of getting severe illness or dying from COVID, which is great. And so for anybody worried about sending their kids back to school, anything along those lines, there's statistically 0 chance of dying from that. Obviously, if somebody's on chemotherapy or if the kid has cancer, anything like that, they would need to be cautious anyways, and probably would be worried about the flu or anything else. So 40 and under, greater chance of dying from the flu. 20 and under, basically 0 statistical chance of getting severe illness or dying from COVID. So great news on that side as well. The interesting thing as well is that when we start talking about race, black people in America, African Americans, they make up about 25% of the deaths of people that have died with COVID. Interesting though, only about 12% of the cases are African American or black people in the United States. So basically twice as likely to die if they get COVID than anybody else. And why is that? Well, what we're seeing, and that the majority of that 25% of the people that have died, African Americans have died with COVID, is that they have other issues. So they're overweight, obese, high blood pressure, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, lung issues, COPD, all these different things. Hey Mary, good to see you out there. Hope you are doing well. So 25% of the deaths with COVID, and I always say with COVID because we don't truly know if it is from COVID or just with COVID, but 25% of the deaths are African American, but only 12% of the cases are African American. Similar in the Hispanic community, not quite as severe as that. What we do know also is that vitamin D is a game changer, and there's tons of research coming out now. People even showing taking 1,000 IU per day decreased the risk. Teresa, good to see you there. Decreased the risk of COVID by 77%. And that's not even a huge dosage. That's not even getting somebody up to that optimal range for most patients that we see. But even taking an extra 1,000 IU of vitamin D per day. Hey, Kimberly, good to see you up there in Cheyenne. Decreased the risk of COVID by 77%. There is no mask. There's no social distancing. There's no washing your hands. Anything like that that's going to show you a 77% decrease in COVID risk. There was another study that showed vitamin D decrease the ICU risk. So if someone went to the hospital with COVID, if they gave them vitamin D right away, instead of 50% of the people going to the ICU, only 2% went in this study. And instead of 7.7% of the people that would die, Sandy, good to see you, only 77.7% of the people would die, 0% of the people died in the study that gave them a high dose vitamin D when they got to the hospital. So instead of all of this, I talked a while back about Minnesota spending $9 million on billboards, on TV commercials, wear a mask, do all these things. If they would have put that money and given everybody vitamin D, even 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, given everybody vitamin D, tested everybody, they could have used that $9 million across the entire state and decreased their risk of COVID 77%. I mean, is that crazy? It's just phenomenal, and yet nobody is talking about this. We're not hearing this in the mainstream news. So those that are just jumping on, get this. 2018, we had 7,778 deaths per day on average for the entire year. 2019, we had 7,821. So we went up maybe 40, 50 points there per day deaths. In 2020 through October 23rd, we've been averaging 7,809 deaths per day. So we're actually we're on track up through October 23rd. We've had less deaths per day than we had in 2019 and just a few more than 2018. So what is that telling us? Well, that one, yes, there are going to be fewer deaths probably from automobile accidents and some things like that. I wasn't able to find those specific numbers yet. But ultimately, that this has not been a dramatic bump in the number of people. It's not like, oh, there's 100 more people a day dying or anything like that, greater than what we would expect. It's actually less than what we would expect, because we expect the number every single year, the number of deaths per day has gone up in this country as the population expands, etc. And this is the first year that we've actually gone down in the number of deaths per day. So pretty interesting, good news, less people dying. We've got some great news out there. Also, the H1N1, 60.8 million cases in 1 year from H1N1, and we're between 6 and 8 million with COVID that as of now. Another thing that we were looking at, the CDC was they reported a study, basically a survey, where they were looking at a control group that was not sick with COVID and then the group that had COVID. And they asked them, did you wear a mask over the last 14 days? And 71% of the people that had COVID said that they had worn a mask every single day over the last 14 days. 74% of the control group said that they'd wear a mask every single day for the last 14 days. So statistically, almost the same. But the biggest difference was that 52% of the people that were sick lived with somebody that had COVID, where only about 12% of the people that were not sick were around and lived with somebody that had COVID. So it really seems like that's the biggest thing. It wasn't mask, it wasn't social distancing, anything else. It was just how close and interacting were they with different people. So some interesting statistics, not to make light of COVID, of the infection, of what's going on, but really to put it in perspective that it is not anywhere nearly as contagious as H1N1. The swine flu back in 2009, 60.1 or 61 million cases in 1 year, in a 12-month span, and 18,000 deaths. So way more contagious H1N1, not as high fatality numbers, but also I don't think it was killing the older people and hitting them as hard as it was here. And we also didn't put sick people back into the retirement homes like we did in a lot of the communities, which really drove up numbers. You look at New York, the state of New York has had half the number of cases as California, but twice as many deaths. And you're like, well, that's weird. What happened? Well, one, we're doing way better on treatment side and doing the inhaled steroids and vitamin D and all these different things. Hospitals have a way better handle on what to do. Then on the other side, because they were doing ventilators and just a lot of things that were killing people in the hospitals in New York. On the other side, though, is that a lot of the people that died in New York were in retirement homes, and were because they sent sick people back to those retirement homes. So California, Texas, twice as many number of cases, half the number of deaths as New York. So things are improving. Better treatments out there, a lot of good things going on. You look at the First Lady, Ms. Trump, and what she did. She basically said, "I did all this natural stuff, and that was it," and she got better. So a lot of good news out there. If you've got any questions at all, go ahead and pop that down below. If you know anybody else that's worried about COVID, that's traveling or thinking about this, and is just worried and like, man, what is going on? What's really true out there? Just send them over this message. Share this message with them. This is a message of positivity, a message of hope that we have this under control. We are getting the handle on this, and this is definitely a positive time, and a time and a chance for us to come together as a society and be supportive of everybody, no matter what your beliefs are, no matter who you're voting for. That if you want to stay home and you're worried and you're concerned about being sick, and you go to the grocery store at the certain times and you do those things, awesome, wonderful. Wear your mask, do those things. And for those in the community that feel comfortable and they need to keep going with their business, and they have to keep fighting for their loved ones and their families, and they can't wear a mask for health reasons or whatever it is, honor and support them as well. This is our chance to come together as a nation. The heck with left or right, Democrat, Republican, that doesn't matter. What we have to focus on is what is best for you, what is best for your body, and get your body as strong as feasibly possible. And that's going to beat safe every single day. So good luck to you guys out there. Make it a great day. Enjoy your weekend. We're going to get a bunch of snow out here. But you take care, everybody. Bye-bye.